Something peculiar stood out when I was thinking about the timeline for my recent theory. While the crying child may have been subject to some kind of torment by his father, the gameplay in FNAF 4 is almost certainly from the perspective of Michael. This poses a threat to the validity of the theory because FNAF 4's gameplay would have to take place no sooner than 1993, the year that FNAF 1 is estimated to take place. So given the benefit of the doubt, let's say FNAF 4's gameplay takes place in 1993. Immediately after the events of FNAF 1, which would allow Michael to have a fresh memory of his phone call with Phone Guy before being fired from Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. That means even if Michael was 5 in the FNAF 4 minigames, which is about the youngest he could be since he's speaking in full sentences, he would be about 15 years old in the FNAF 4 gameplay. This is important because while Michael appears to be a teenager in the FNAF 4 minigames, 10 years later he's about 3 foot tall, crawling on his bedroom floor, and is only about the height of his bedroom doorknob. Although we know Michael is our player in FNAF 4, our perspective seems to be from someone far younger, someone about the crying child's age back in 1983. Interestingly, while we've linked the crying child to the runaway from Midnight Motorist, the crying child's room in FNAF 4 doesn't have a window like the one in Midnight Motorist does. And since Pizzeria Simulator came out after FNAF 4, Scott would have had every opportunity to model the Midnight Motorist house after the FNAF 4 house, if that's what it was trying to convey. It almost seems like we have 3 different house layouts. The one from Midnight Motorist with a window, the one from the FNAF 4 minigames with 1 door, and the one from the FNAF 4 gameplay with 2 doors. Let's talk about the house that appears earliest in the timeline. In Midnight Motorist, we know that Elizabeth had recently died, and that the crying child has become disobedient to his father, destructive to his property, and frequently runs away. On one of the nights that the crying child runs away, Michael mentions that he had a rough day. How can we connect the crying child's rough day to him running away later that night? We need more information to work with. During the FNAF 4 minigames, we see the crying child's Fredbear plush warily reminding him of something. He says, "No, don't you remember what you saw?" when the crying child tries to walk through Fredbear's family diner. So what did he see? Since Elizabeth dies at Circus Baby's Pizza World, which we know because Circus Baby recalls being on stage before killing her, it's plausible to infer that the crying child was also there. In a teaser for Sister Location posted to scottgames.com, there's a statement made by a local describing the sudden cancellation of Circus Baby's Pizza World. They say there was only a handful of people that ever got a look at the inside, kids from here and there, making sure everything works right, you know. Based on this source and Circus Baby's account of the minutes leading up to Elizabeth's death, we know that there were children running around on that day. Out of the small crowd of children that were allowed into the restaurant before it opened, it would make sense if William's 2 youngest kids were in attendance. Circus Baby recalls the number of children that were present prior to Elizabeth's death. She counts, there were 4, then 3, then 2, then 1. We know that Elizabeth is the one in this case, and it would make sense that the crying child is the last person to see her before her death. What if the crying child was with Elizabeth when she went up to see Circus Baby, but he left for a moment, leaving Elizabeth alone with Circus Baby? We know that Elizabeth spent some alone time with Circus Baby before dying, as Circus Baby describes making an ice cream for her after the other children had left. So if the crying child got distracted for a couple of seconds, leaving Elizabeth alone with Circus Baby, by the time he got back, she could have been in the process of being scooped. Circus Baby mentions that Elizabeth screamed for only a moment, and by the time the children had rushed back into the room, they couldn't hear her over the sounds of their own excitement.
There was screaming for a moment, but only for a moment. Then other children rushed in again, but they couldn't hear her over the sounds of their own excitement.
The way this is worded, Elizabeth screamed for only a short duration, but by the time the children had come back into the room, she was still screaming. So if the crying child ran off with a group of kids, leaving Elizabeth alone, he could have been the first one to re-enter the room, catching a glimpse of Elizabeth as she's being stuffed into Circus Baby's stomach cavity. With this information gathered, we can now begin to theorize what made up the crying child's rough day. We know that his bad day took place shortly after he witnessed Elizabeth's death, and that he'll go to extreme lengths to leave his house. The crying child could be experiencing PTSD from that night at Circus Baby's, perhaps beginning his chronic crying. Michael would see that his brother's been locked in his room, crying all day, and would relay this to his father, saying, "Leave him alone, he's had a rough day." Now that we have that piece in place, we're faced with another question. How does Michael know that William is going to provoke the crying child as soon as he gets home? Well, knowing what we know about the crying child's day at Circus Babies, he's likely confused by what he saw. And since we can see a child sitting in Funtime Freddy's storage tank in his blueprints, it's possible that Elizabeth was captured alive. This could also explain how Elizabeth screamed for only a moment, but was still making noise by the time the children had rushed back in. Regardless, the crying child being there when his sister disappeared would leave him confused and anxious. His brother wouldn't believe him. His father neglected his concerns. He told them what happened to Elizabeth and they wouldn't help him fix it. So he goes off on his own and heads to that place. So what is that place that William refers to? It wouldn't be Junior's, as William clearly gives a bad connotation to this place and avoids mentioning it by name. And with William just leaving Junior's, he would describe it differently than he does with that place. Judging by William's wording, we can infer that that place is somewhere that A, William has not been to in a while, and B, William is not particularly fond of. Based on this criteria, an immediate candidate comes to mind. Ran off to Circus Babies Pizza World again, except it was never actually named that. Circus Babies Pizza World was going to be the name of the venue, it was never actually opened, leaving it a nameless, vacant lot. Thus, ran off to Circus Babies is inaccurate. Circus Babies Pizza World doesn't exist, but since we know that Midnight Motorist takes place shortly after Circus Babies was cancelled, the building would still be standing. That's why William refers to it the way he does. He remembers it as being the place where his own negligence led to his precious daughter dying. He is embarrassed by his venture into Circus Babies, thinking he could make sinister animatronics and keep his family separate. His shame makes it so that he can't even utter the name Circus Baby, and since it was never officially opened, he refers to the empty location as simply that place. That place where he first recognized his oversights. That place that the crying child frequently revisits, having to break his window because his father strictly prohibits him from going there. After witnessing Elizabeth's disappearance, the crying child would run off to Circus Babies Pizza World against his father's approval to try to find her. In Midnight Motorist, William comes home to check on his son, who Michael mentions is having a rough day due to Elizabeth's disappearance. William disregards this and goes to see if his son is home, seeing that his door is closed. Eventually, he realizes that the crying child has run off again and is at Circus Babies looking for Elizabeth. Now, how does solving the pre-Midnight Motorist story help to explain the 3 different houses we see throughout the games? We now know that the crying child is running off to Circus Babies Pizza World, and that William intends to punish him when he gets back. The most logical explanation for the next house in our timeline, based on the information we have, is that the Aftons move into a new house. Aside from completely remodeling their first house, this is the only explanation for the entirely different layout we see in FNAF 4. This also supports a quote from Sister Location. "Father, it's me, Michael. I did it. I found it. It was right where you said it would be." Since it is implied that the Sister Location bunker is located directly below the Afton's house, and Michael watches TV after work like he did back in 1983, it's plausible that Michael returns to his old abandoned house and lives there for a week while he works at Circus Babies Entertainment and Rental. That would make the "it" in the sentence, "it was right where you said it would be," the bunker being right below his old house, just as his father had described. So why exactly did the Aftons move? When William is unable to control his son and the erratic behavior he exhibits after Elizabeth's death, he moves away from the old Circus Babies lot in an attempt to put that place in the past. This makes Michael despise his younger brother, the one responsible for his father's anger and this new change of scenery. In the move, Michael loses all of his friends and meets a group of delinquents at his new school. These are the bullies that we see in the FNAF 4 minigames, who think Michael is cool for picking on his vulnerable younger brother. It's possible that part of the reason behind Midnight Motorist's importance is to show that Michael is not a bad guy. In FNAF 4, Michael is portrayed as a terrible brother, causing the crying child to live in fear until he's indirectly killed by his own brother. In the next canon game, Sister Location, Michael now appears to be the protagonist, unwittingly risking his life to set his sister free. At this point, we aren't entirely sure what changed inside of Michael to turn him from a villain to a hero, aside from the small glimpse of his redemption that we get at the end of FNAF 4 when he seems to sincerely apologize to his brother before he dies. Then comes Pizzeria Simulator, and with far less dialogue than either of the aforementioned games, we get the final piece to our puzzle. Michael Afton wasn't always a bully. He used to protect his brother before he got in with the wrong crowd and made the wrong choices. As with all of the Aftons, Elizabeth's death was hard on Michael. He chose to take his emotions out on his brother, who seemed to be somewhat responsible for what happened to Elizabeth. Everyone was looking for someone to blame. The crying child, of course, was completely innocent of everything he was being mistreated for. We know that William was at fault because his name was on the blueprints for Circus Baby, but he was too narcissistic to admit it. I see the TV program in Sister Location, The Immortal and the Restless, as a metaphor for William's conceit. In the show, Vlad is adamant that Clara's baby is not his, and while she tries to convince him, he maintains his stance. This is reminiscent of how William won't accept accountability for his role in Elizabeth's death. In one episode, Clara tries to prove to Vlad it's his child by saying he ate the cat, to which Vlad responds with, "Sounds like something he got from your side of the family."
He ate the cat!
Sounds like something he got from your side of the family.
When Vlad, like William, is faced with blame, he simply redirects it to the next person rather than owning up for his responsibility. One thing that stands out in the house from FNAF 4 is Elizabeth's bedroom. If Elizabeth had died before the move, how would she have a bedroom in the Aftons' new house? There are a few ways that this could be explained, but I believe that this could be Scott's one actual retcon that he referred to in an old Steam post. Back in FNAF 2, Scott was writing a story about two brothers who didn't get along and an empty girl's room for a mysterious younger sister. Thinking this would be the last game in the series, Scott had no plans to tell her story any further. Then when Scott decides to continue the series, he needs an explanation for this little girl's absence that makes sense when fit into the rest of the story. Realizing that Elizabeth's disappearance could be an important turn of events for the Aftons, he decides to fit her into the story earlier than he had originally planned. Now that we understand why there are two different houses in the FNAF series, what about the final layout that we see in FNAF 4? This brings us back to the opening of the video. Since we know Michael is the player in FNAF 4, why does he seem to have the appearance of the crying child? We only need a little bit more information. Featured in this game are 5 of the well-established animatronics from the franchise: Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and the classic Fredbear. However, these aren't animatronics that were made to sing and dance in a Freddy's location. These are something else. Each animatronic's established name is prefaced with the word Nightmare. At first glance, the cast of animatronics in FNAF 4 don't seem to stand out. It's the same animatronics we've seen in all the other games: Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and Fredbear. Being the one outlier, we have to ask, why Fredbear? And in a game that shows us Fredbear's family diner, with Spring Bonnie and Fredbear being the headliners, why not include both of them? And why do the Nightmare animatronics even exist in the first place? The answer is actually very simple. The Nightmare animatronics don't exist. They are figments of Michael's imagination, his nightmares. Michael is imagining what the crying child was put through back in 1983, being constantly harassed by vestiges of the Freddy's animatronics in and out of his home. That's why the animatronics that the bullies dressed up as appear in this game, torturing Michael like he had tortured his younger brother. Michael and his friends bully the crying child every day, which explains why the 4 Freddy's animatronics are present every night. Fredbear, however, only appears in the later nights, paralleling how initially the crying child was only bothered by the bullies until the one day when he got up too close and personal with Fredbear. Furthermore, all of the animatronics attack from outside of Michael's bedroom, except for Foxy, who appears in his bedroom hiding in his closet. This directly parallels the relationship between the crying child and his bullies. Most of them could only get to him when he's at Fredbear's, but Michael, who wore the Foxy mask, would bully him at home too. The crying child could hide from most of his bullies at home, but Michael, nicknamed Foxy Bro, he could never escape. This explains the significance of the animatronics selected for this game and clears up the height discrepancy. As Michael is dreaming that he is the crying child back in 1983, he would be short like the crying child is depicted. Also notable are the plushes seen in the game. Although Michael is the player, he sees his brother's old Foxy and Freddy plushes. This is Michael torturing himself by putting himself through an exaggerated manifestation of what the crying child experienced. Michael exaggerates the animatronics because of how guilty he feels. This is backed by a rare occurrence in which a bottle of pills, vase of flowers, or IV drip can be seen beside the player's bed. This is clearly Michael's guilt taking over, as all three of these items are commonly found beside a patient's hospital bed. And since we see Michael apologizing to his brother, who appears to be in a coma, Michael might have a memory of his hospital bed with flowers and such beside it. We also find out that the bedroom from FNAF 4 belongs to the crying child, since the surveillance cameras that William set up to monitor him show the same bed. So since we know that Michael is the player, but his bedroom and appearance match that of the crying child, we can conclude that Michael is having nightmares about what he put his brother through. In his nightmares, he creates an environment that is reminiscent of his brother's old room, with his bed and plushes. Michael imagines his brother's room as far more dangerous than it really was, with no windows to escape from and doors on each side of his room where animatronics are constantly lurking. In hindsight, this bedroom doesn't make a lot of sense. What would be the purpose of having a child's bedroom in the center of a house, with mirrored hallways on each side of it and doors connecting each hallway to his room? The only way this would make sense is if it was a dramatic reimagining of a bedroom. In the first FNAF game, which we know takes place before Michael's nightmares in FNAF 4, the player has a rare chance of seeing Golden Freddy, an animatronic that shares striking resemblance to Fredbear. Unlike the other 4 animatronics in the game, Golden Freddy appears to teleport in and out of the office and is accompanied by flashing images and text that reads, "It's me." This fits into the story perfectly. As Michael is experiencing overwhelming guilt a decade after his brother's death, he begins hallucinating the animatronic that he fed his brother to. "It's me" is likely Michael's own head taunting him, reminding him that he will never forget what happened at Fredbear's years ago. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching the video. I just wanted to take a quick minute and share my appreciation for all of the support I received from my last video. It hasn't even been a full week since I posted my first FNAF theory, and I've gained 21 subscribers and almost 2,000 views on my channel since then. I've been reading comments from people who agree or disagree with the theory, and others who just want to share support for what I'm doing. I just wanted to give a quick thanks to everyone who watched the video, subscribed, commented, liked. I've been getting a lot of good feedback, and it really does make me want to continue making these videos for you guys. So thank you so much for the support, and I look forward to continuing to making content for you all.